I am not a liar. I have killed thousands.
It was about this time last year that we got Ubisoft's Tom Clancy's The Division. As something of a massively open world online third-person shooter, it was a pretty enjoyable game under the right circumstances, despite suffering from a severe case of Ubisoftitis. Now a year later we've got another Tom Clancy game with Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, developed by Ubisoft Paris. The latest in the Ghost Recon franchise, a series of games that has strayed further and further from its origins with every new installment. This one, much like The Division, is a third-person shooter and tries to cover somewhat new ground, putting you up against the Santa Blanca cartel in Bolivia as you and your squad try to take down the notorious El Sueno. Wildlands takes elements from Metal Gear Solid 5, Just Cause 2, Grand Theft Auto, and even Far Cry 3 and 4. It's a cocktail of every third-person open-world game you've played in the last half-decade, and if you're looking for a game to sink a surplus of hours into over the next few weeks, well, this could be the one. So after a particularly long-winded intro, you're thrown into the game and tasked with bringing down the cartel one piece at a time. What's neat about the game right off the bat is that you can pretty much do this in any order you want. The game world is open from the get-go, though obviously some areas are going to be more difficult than others, and heading there too early is going to get your ass kicked. The goal is to work your way up the ranks until you get El Sueno's attention, at which point he sticks his head out of the sewers, so to speak, and then you take him out. This pans out in typical Ubisoft fashion as you'd expect, with an absolutely humongous game world to explore and uncover, with story missions, side missions, collectibles, and other things that give completionists a wet dream. Each new area you visit, you just drive around collecting intel until it reveals the story missions on the map. Then you complete those missions to take on the head of the area. During these missions, if you're not fighting the Santa Blanca, you're fighting the Unidad, who are kind of like the cops of the game in a sense. Taking influence, I guess, from a game like GTA, this is a wanted system of sorts where the more you fight back, the greater the resistance becomes, and it's easier to just hightail it out of there than to stand your ground. Aside from the multitude of things to do, the game offers up a multitude of ways to customize your experience, from customizing the parts of a weapon, of which there are dozens, through to the way you can personalize your character's appearance, be it male or female, and honestly I'd say 100 if not more outfits and items of clothing to choose from. None of which seem to affect any of your character's stats though, as far as I could tell. I mean, a ghillie suit for instance offers up as much cover in grass as does bright blue camouflage. As you explore Bolivia and take out lieutenants, destroy caches of drugs, assassinate prominent cartel leaders, you're also tagging supplies you come across, medicine, food and fuel, and these are needed to purchase the many upgrades for your character. And aside from that, you'll help out the rebels, who will in turn offer up assistance with mortar strikes or by sending back up to your location. If you've played games like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Just Cause, these elements and mechanics are going to feel very familiar. Wildlands, however, is a bit of a strange game in the way it plays. I mean, looking at screenshots or gameplay, you'd assume it's a standard third-person shooter, but it's kind of not in a way. I mean, for starters, you die so fucking easily in this game, which is fine, but the amount of enemies they often throw at you doesn't gel with the way the damage is handled or the way they behave. There's no button to snap to cover either, despite the fact there's plenty of waist-high elements scattered around areas where you engage in combat. And it really needs to be a cover shooter at times because you're horribly exposed and never really feel like you're in control of your character's position during a gunfight. It just feels kinda loose. Despite there being a lot of guns in the game, they're all pretty much the same in the way that they just kill most enemies in a couple of well-placed hits. I found myself using silenced weapons like 99% of the time too. It's a much safer bet to remain undetected, with that familiar semicircle filling up when you're in an enemy's line of sight, but pulling this off is extremely tricky because of how erratic and unpredictable the enemy AI can be at times. On top of all of that though, it picks and chooses elements from more casual third-person shooters and then more realistic tactical shooting games.
Makes 5.
Oh, baby, a triple! Oh, yeah!
So you've got a few different stances which affect accuracy, movement speed, the noise you make, and so forth, and yet despite this, you'll frequently see enemies wielding dual Mac-10s who are able to hit you with perfect accuracy from medium to long distances. Or guys hip-firing MGs with perfect accuracy from long distances who also happen to be wearing heavy body armor. Do you remember those armored guys from Far Cry 3 and 4? Yeah, same thing. They've gone to the effort of adding in bullet drops, so you got to compensate for firing long distances, but there's no consistency to bullet penetration. So you can't shoot through a thin wall or a shoddily thrown together wooden fence, but then you can shoot through a metallic grate or a metal fence. Look through your binoculars or throw a drone up into the air and you can magically tag enemies in the area and keep an eye on their movements when you're trying to take them out, which, yeah, it's a staple of video games in recent years, but it's hardly realistic. Compared to a lot of the older Ghost Recon games too, there's no way to non-lethally take someone down, at least in the sense of shooting their gun out of their hand or something along those lines. You can sneak up behind someone and knock them out, which is kinda pointless unless you actually need that particular person alive. Like I said, it's this weird mix of realism and more casual gameplay, and it doesn't quite fit into either category. What's that old saying? You can't have your cake and eat it? Wildlands really shines during co-op play, though mostly because it can be easy to coordinate how you're going to take on a group of enemies, though obviously the downside here is the unavoidable human error. But also co-op's more fun if only for the fact that you can share some of the downright wacky and weird shit you're going to see in this game. Some of the stuff I've seen during my playtime is the sort of thing you'll see in a game like Just Cause or GTA, and for a game that's again trying to sell itself off as pseudo-realistic, it's a bit of a juxtaposition.
I think that would be anywhere to kill.
Annoyingly during co-op too, when you're tagging supplies, each player has to tag them individually to get them. Though this doesn't count for intel, and you can still receive a quest reward if someone's doing a quest 5 or 6 kilometers away. When you fail a mission, after the restart, it's not uncommon for the game to often respawn you kilometers away from the other people you're playing with. And then when you try to teleport to their location, even then it's often going to put you a few hundred meters back for no discernible reason. Most of the time though, it works pretty well, even if all of the actual missions in the game happen to kinda suck, regardless of playing solo or co-op. When you're just messing around and exploring, it's really fun, but it just seems every actual mission you have to do is kinda terrible, and it often boils down to trial and error. Frustratingly too, whenever you do some of the main missions, of which there's usually 4 to 6 in any area, you're not given the option to restart from a checkpoint or anything. Now, whether or not this is a result of playing online, I'm not sure, but not being able to restart if you screwed up your stealthy approach is a bit of a bummer. On a positive note, I do have to say that this really is a phenomenal looking game at times. The backdrop of Bolivia is really picturesque, and the day and night cycle looks great too. There's rain and snow, and each area is generally different to the last, and the other attention to detail with the things like mud on your car tires or the sun shining off water-filled potholes is truly impressive. In terms of the performance, Wildlands is alright without being amazing. I'm using the latest drivers and it's stable most of the time, but it does dip occasionally. What's really cool though is how the graphics options menu actually shows you what effects each setting has in game, which is something that, every game should be doing. As a solo game, I think Wildlands kind of suffers because it's this huge, detailed world to explore, but no one to explore it with, and it lacks the intentional wackiness and arcadey controls of a similar game like Just Cause 2 or 3, to justify spending enough time in that world. As a co-op game, it can be a lot of fun when everything gels, and it's definitely more entertaining that way, though obviously playing with people you're familiar with is going to make or break this experience.
No fucking way!
There is a lot of game time and value here either way, and if you've played an Ubisoft game like ever, you'll know that you'll get a fair bit of time out of it, so it's kind of hard to fault it in that sense. So if you've ever wanted to play a video game version of the Narcos TV show and don't mind a bit of a bumpy ride, then I'd say give Ghost Recon Wildlands a go.
No! No!